Up next, we have a panel discussion on mentoring advances inclusivity, how corporations are working to create a more inclusive culture both internally and externally through mentoring. Today, you'll hear from Patricia Contreras, Gabriela Gonzalez, Jennifer L. Walker, and the panel will be moderated by Dr. Leroy David Nunnery II.
Hi, everybody. This is Lee Nunnery, and I'm glad to be with you. I am Senior Advisor for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion for Million Women Mentors, and founder and principal of Plus Ultra LLC, a boutique strategic advisory company based in the Philadelphia area. I'm glad to moderate this panel. As the father of two daughters who are ambitious and are in their adult stages, mentoring, I know, has been important to them, and there's been a renewed vigor in equity and accommodating life in this new virtual environment that we're all living in. More companies than ever are prioritizing their investments in building internal and external cultures that support inclusivity through mentoring. Now, Jean Rhodes, an author, wrote in her book Older and Wiser that mentoring can boost not only self-efficacy, but also self-awareness, self-management, and information channels. This panel today features leaders who've responded in this time of crisis, but also have been leading their companies in their respective fields with promising practices in and around mentoring. So I'm glad to welcome the three of them. Joining me today are Gabriela Gonzalez, Deputy Director of Intel Corporation. Hello, Gabriela. Patricia Contreras, who is Vice President of Public Affairs for Rockwell Automation. And Jennifer Walker, Vice President of Global Benefits and Global Human Resources Operations for Archer Daniels Midland ADM. Hello, Jennifer. Well, we're going to go right into it. and lay out, give you all a chance to not only tell about your personal story, particularly around mentoring, but I want to pose it in the form of a question. Each one of you work at different levels in your respective organizations. You have broad responsibilities and accountabilities. I'm sure you've made your parents proud and your families and communities proud. Um, we know that Intel is a technology giant, world facing and global, as is ADM, a food processing company, as is Rockwell, an industrial automation company. I want you to share each a bit about your role in the organization and your connection to Million Women Mentors, but highlight in your response, if you will, your connection and experience with mentoring, a personal perspective. So, Gabriella, we'll start with you, and then we'll go around the horn. Please begin.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you here today. And I just want to say thank you and give a shout out to my Intel team who decided to opt out of our staff meeting today to join our session today. So hello, everybody from Intel. Um, I'm Deputy Director and Operations Manager for the Intel Foundation. And in this role, I oversee a team which manages the Foundation's day-to-day operations. Also employee programs supported by the Foundation and our corporate charitable contributions processes. We were honored to be one of the first companies to join Million Women Mentors back in 2014. And since we have sustained a mutually benefiting relationship, supporting share value programs between Intel and Million Women Mentors. So we're really proud of this relationship and this partnership. Personally, I've been mentoring young people for the past 20 plus years to help guide and advise them in their educational and career journeys. I'm always proud to share one special story that's close to my heart about a particular young lady that I started mentoring when she was 14 and finished in middle school, while she was also pregnant with her first child. She's now a proud mother and a graduate from the University of Arizona with a master's degree in cellular and molecular medicine. So that story always brings joy to my heart and the power of mentoring. Over the past 10 years as well, I mentor several young ladies through a program called Positive Paths here in Arizona. I'm currently mentoring a young lady who is pursuing a career in applied science and aircraft maintenance technology at Chandler Gilbert Community College. And it's been a joy working with her and just watching her grow and develop. Um, Also, I wanted to share that mentoring at Intel happens both organically and formally through various mentorship programs across the company. Again, over my career at Intel, I've been blessed to have had the opportunity to mentor several young junior engineers. And I'm currently mentoring two engineers, a young Latina woman and a young Black male. Um, and I would be mentoring more, except time is limited, unfortunately, and I value these opportunities to mentor. Um, the mentoring process has been as valuable for me as I learn about and from every person that I mentor. And I hope for them as well, because they trust me to provide them that guidance and advice that's going to help them to progress their careers at Intel and beyond. So that is a little bit about me and relationship.
Gabriella, that's terrific. Really intriguing, especially those stories about individuals who have gone through so much adversity and have now succeeded. You've got to be proud of them. Patricia, why don't you tell us a little bit about your work at Rockwell Automation, and the same question posed to you, given your role and your connection to Million Women Mentors, how has mentoring factored into your life and in the work that you do?
Well, thank you for having me. As Vice President of Public Affairs, I not only oversee our foundation, I also oversee external communications and government affairs. This is a new role for me. I've been put in this role effective July 1st and have spent the last 12 years overseeing the work of our foundation. And we really looked at the gaps that we had, specifically women and girls, and had been doing a lot of work. And the partnership with Million Women Mentors really helped amplify across not only our US footprint, but globally in the 100 countries that we operate, really looking at scaling that work. And so that's how we got partnered. And I would agree with Gabriela, it's been a mutually beneficial relationship. And we look forward to the great work that we will continue to have. Personally, I grew up in the shadows of our global headquarters with no idea what was happening in the building, a product of public schools, and always wanted to be an engineer. And, you know, everything that we talk about in terms of barriers, of the belief gap, were things that were my lived experience. And they weren't just perceptions. It was really that search of belonging and being repeatedly the only in the room, whether I was the only person of color or the only woman of color, and consistently being told by peers and adults that were there to support me that I didn't belong and that I shouldn't be there. And so for me, this is personal. This is really about ensuring that no young woman has an experience like that again, and what we can do as a company to really live out our company purpose. But for me, it's that personal passion and purpose that I have. And as a mother of two young children, one of them a girl, this really is around breaking down those barriers and not only telling our young people that they can be anything, but really showing them through the opportunities and the support that we provide.
Patricia, you use some powerful phrases there: scale up, belief gap, belonging. Wow, this is it's really touching me, and I'm sure the audience is getting a lot out of it. Jennifer, give us the same response to the question about sharing your role in the organization, what your connection is to Million Women Mentors, and more importantly, your connection and experience with mentoring.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me today. I have responsibilities at ADM for global benefits and all of our HR operations. But you might be surprised that I always wasn't an HR person. I started my career on the corporate communications side before moving on to roles in corporate services, as well as HR partnering before the role that I had today. And a big part of that was ADM and the mentors I found along the way. Sometimes, finding kind of what those skills and capabilities are, being prepared for risk before I thought I was prepared for risk, and those opportunities made me very self-aware and empathetic to others who may not have those same frameworks or support that I was lucky enough to have. And at ADM, we started working with STEM Connector and then MWM to see how can we build a more diverse and inclusive pipeline of talent into food and ag to build a stronger industry. That's what it's about at the end of the day. Can we create awareness? Can we create access to these kind of opportunities? And so I mentioned over my career, I've had different types of mentors, both informal and formal. And I've also been lucky enough to be able to be a mentor. One of my mentees who has left a particular impact on me, we started working when she was in high school. She was one of the early ones in her family to graduate high school. And then this past May, she graduated from college. And I think the best mentor and mentee relationships is when you learn something from each other. Hopefully, I can share some of the experiences and the skills that I've learned along the way, but also I can learn from different mindsets, different ways of looking at the world, looking at opportunities that I perhaps never even considered as well. And I think that's where the benefit is. And although I'm not lucky enough to have young girls, I'm the mother to 3 boys. And so I want them to also see that awareness and access for any role can be available for anyone at any one time. And that's part of something that I'm passionate about, is how do we create those opportunities for others?
You know, the three of you are just amazing icons and examples of what happens when you are open and you believe that someone else can do not only what you've done, but can possibly do more. And when you have that sense of belief, Jennifer, you just used the phrase of preparing for risk, right? That ability to say to somebody, look, there are all kinds of variables, things that we're living through right now in this pandemic that nobody could have encountered. But if we're talking, if we're communicating and feeding each other, there's some real upside. So we're going to go to the next question, and each of you will have a separate question. This current climate really has forced companies and individuals to prioritize their time, but also their resources to support mentoring, but also keep people together. So, Gabriella, I'll come to you first. The Intel Foundation has been committed to improving lives around the world as a catalyst for change by investing in innovative STEM programming, providing disaster relief, which is really important these days, and also amplifying the investments of Intel employees across a broad spectrum of personal philanthropy and volunteerism. So, in this current climate, is a big question. How have you been doing this work? How have you decided on the path you're currently taking? How is the company shaping this strategy of getting folks to really step up beyond their day-to-day work?
Thank you. That's a great question, Dr. Nunnery. Um, as always, Intel Foundation works in tandem and very closely aligned to Intel Corporation. So there's been several things that we have done together, supporting each other. So for example, in January, right off the bat of this year, Intel committed $1 million to the International Red Cross. To really address the pandemic impacts early in its course. So this helped the Red Cross to sustain and evolve its operations, which they weren't even quite ready for at the time, such as supporting the quarantine facilities and distributing food in areas with stay-at-home orders and providing health and mental health services. That's just one example. The second example I can say is Intel convened a partnership group with Firstbook to launch the Creating Learning Connections initiative, which was designed to fuel education by supporting students in Title I eligible school districts affected by COVID across the nation. And so this program gave underserved students and educators access to critical tools and resources, including internet connectivity, technology devices, and hands-on STEM learning solutions as well. Following that, in March of 2020 this year, as the pandemic worsened in the US, the Intel Foundation created a special match opportunity that enabled employees and retirees as well to amplify their contributions to COVID-19 relief, providing up to $2 million as well as an additional $4 million directly from the foundation. In a more recent example, just roughly about a month ago, the Intel Foundation joined the STEM Next Opportunity Fund, the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, and the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation to launch the Million Girls Moonshot, very closely aligned to some of the goals of Million Women Mentors. The Million Girls Moonshot is a transformative nationwide movement designed to eliminate the persistent gender gap in STEM fields by engaging 1 more million girls in STEM pursuits through innovative and high quality STEM learning opportunities over the next 5 years. We know, as we've all been experiencing this pandemic, that it's hindered learning opportunities for students and really exacerbated the digital divide and the engineering skills gap, particularly among school-age children and youth of color. So it's important to know that after school and out of school programs throughout the country are continuing to serve as a lifeline to understand communities during this pandemic. And with many schools across the nation after still closed or not available to the children as things evolve with this pandemic, after school programs have stepped in to provide those additional services and serving the families of essential workers. So of course, we remain committed to communities impacted by natural disasters. This year, we responded to natural disasters around the world, from the floods in India to the wildfires in California and the Pacific Northwest. And we will continue to support these efforts through the generosity, passion, and volunteering of Intel volunteers and employees and retirees matched by the Intel Foundation. The last item that I wanted to share with our audience is that this is also not a time to stand on the sidelines, and Intel is certainly not doing that when it comes to social equity and racial justice. Intel committed an additional $1 million to support communities in breakdown systems, which contribute to that persistent inequity. Moreover, Intel is assessing its own policies and systems across our company to identify inequities in our own processes and put fixes in place to eliminate them. So again, we're constantly finding opportunities and looking for opportunities to help not only our company be there for communities around the world, but also to empower our employees to continue to contribute and match their passion, their interests with the needs of the communities.
I really appreciate that answer, because what you're saying is mentoring is part of that connective tissue. It's one of those things that gets employees to not only take pride in what they do, but also in each other and the communities they serve. It's good business. I love that. Now, Patricia,
Yes, thank you.
you work for Rockwell Automation. You're on the forefront of technology, 23,000 employees, and over 100 countries served. So you're working for an organization that not only has a huge stake in what happens in the US, but also globally. What strategies are working for employees internally, but also externally? What are you doing in other countries to support inclusivity through mentoring?
Great question. So I'll start externally. Our foundation kind of pillars are STEM education and equity and inclusion. And we partnered early in 2005 with the after school program first. And that progression of programs starting as young as first Lego League all the way up through first robotics. And this program actually came to us from our employees. And so you talk about that kind of bottom up, grassroots, employee led and employee driven organization. That's exactly how this partnership started. Fast forward to where we are today, we have over 200 teams that we sponsor that has an active Rockwell Automation employee that serves a number of purposes. Sponsorships of team financially is one thing, but we know that that's not the only barrier that students face. And so the time and talent that each of our employees dedicate and pour into these teams is priceless. And also, quite frankly, there are recruiters, there are brand ambassadors. They're talking about our company because being B2B, oftentimes students don't even know who we are or what we do. And so having our employees really interacting with students and talking to them about internship opportunities, early career programs, helping guide them through, for first generation students, back to that opportunity and belief gap, some of this is just unknown, and really helping to piece that together and serve a very valuable role of being even more than what a mentor is, really being kind of that sponsor, advocating for young people, especially young women and students of color. So I would say that's what we're really doing externally, as well as really trying to increase the number of women judges that we have at First Robotics competitions to really ensure, again, that students see themselves in all places and spaces. Internally, working really closely with our employee resource groups on peer mentoring and even generational mentoring. So looking at how our millennials can have a really great relationship with our near retirement veteran employees. And that is absolutely mutually beneficial, where one is perhaps coaching on the latest social media platform, and the other is really doing that transfer of knowledge and the institutional pieces that are just so foundational to being, in business for over 100 years, as well as reverse mentoring, which is really important for us, especially for women of color, to move from the mentoring relationship really to a sponsorship relationship, where at leadership review and when you're talking about succession planning, that names are being brought up that often are individuals who are unseen in the organization. And so those are just some of the pieces that we're looking at internally and externally as it relates to mentoring.
Again, what a thoughtful and complete, Patricia. I love it. And the thing I noted here about ambassadors, brand ambassadors, that we often forget that the individuals we're mentoring are also carrying a message. If they were treated well and they feel that they are fully included in the organization, in the culture, and acculturated, that they also are extensions of us. So I think that's a powerful message. Jennifer at ADM, a company that many people do not know, but everybody has an ADM product somewhere inside their household. You have a publicly available corporate code of conduct that lists diversity as first on its list of upholding integrity for our people. So why is this so important to ADM? Why is it championing diversity as part of its value set? And then how do you translate that into building internal and external cultures of inclusion through mentoring?
I love that comment, and this panel in particular, even the discussion that we're having today, you learn so much, right? And it shapes kind of how you go forward and how you take that leading practice with you. And at ADM, I'm so glad that you noticed that. We see diversity and inclusion as simply who we are. It's what we do. You made a comment earlier, it's good business. If you look at the research, it's pretty certain those companies that are more diverse and inclusive are more innovative, they have better financial results, and they're higher performing. But to do that, people have to feel that they can come to work in their authentic self, that they have to be their full self, whether it's ethnicity, gender, visible and invisible diversity, LGBTQ, person with disability, different cultural background, different geographic footprints. If we can create, fabrics of our culture where people can be their true selves, that's where you're going to have the discretionary performance. In an ADM, we think that, individuals really can't get great results by themselves. I mean, if you think back at your career and some of your proudest achievements, usually that wasn't done by an individual person. That was a team that was coming together. And mentoring is one way that you can really accelerate that personal and professional growth. And you have to kind of come to it with an objective in mind. For the mentee, it's an opportunity to learn new skills. It's an opportunity to have a guide, create a bigger network for yourself. The earlier point, to be seen, to have others that you can trade ideas with and best practice. For the mentor, that's also an opportunity to help grow the next generation of leaders, to help foster talent development, to again learn new mindsets, new ways of doing things. So we try to be very purposeful about our mentoring at ADM. We might have targeted mentoring for women leaders. It might be for the young engineer who is just starting out. It may be because someone's going on an international assignment for the first time and guiding along the way. Different reasons, different objectives for that individual person. But at the end of the day, we're trying to see how that business opportunity and that personal development or growth opportunity can come together to really accelerate that personal and professional growth for the individual. And that's also why it's so important to do discussions like we're doing today to increase our own networks, those that can informally mentor us ourselves. And that's part of the work that we're doing with Together We Grow, bringing together different companies, academic partners, NGOs, affinity groups to see how can we help build more diversity inclusion for our industry overall. We can do great things individually, but we really have to come together as an industry, as a group, to get the kind of systematic and sustained change that we're looking for. Mentoring can make a huge difference on an individual level, and there's opportunities to grow and to build that for the good of all.
Wonderful. And again, I'm taking notes, folks, as I listen to your responses. And just said, Jennifer, about creating fabrics of our culture, and that's really what this is about, these interdependencies, these human connections that we're trying to make while we produce whatever the good is. We've got to make sure that we remember the humane part of these organizations. We've got a couple of questions from our listening audience. And I'm going to throw in a personal observation around the first one. The question is, what is the most surprising or one of the most surprising things that you've learned through your efforts in and around mentoring? Now, for me, the surprising thing was being mentored by some individuals who didn't look like me. When I came out of grad school, started my career in Chicago in banking, nobody in my family had ever been in corporate finance or capital markets work before. So I had nobody to lead me who looked like me. I started fashioning my career around those whom I saw who were very successful, who seemed to have a knack and a way, even the way I packed my briefcase. You used to carry briefcases back then. It was because I saw a pattern of success and I wanted to emulate that. And then later on, I was able to shape my own. So the surprising thing about that was it didn't take a lot of effort on their part. It took a lot of energy and effort on my part as the mentee. I had to give as much as I could get. So let's turn that question to anyone who wants to answer first. What's one of the more surprising things that you've uncovered as you've gotten into the mentoring business? Anybody want
I'll
to jump
also
in?
drop Yeah, I'll add to
Excellent.
that. Drawing from personal experience, what you described is exhausting, especially as a woman of color, code switching, assimilating, the way I say my name. And so in most situations, I will introduce myself as Patricia, but really it's Patricia. And I don't want to get bombarded with 1,000 questions. So when we talk about, really bringing your authentic self to work, that's easier said than done if you're part of the dominant group. And so part of what I've seen is that it's really important to build trust. And so you can't skip all the steps. And so for me, some of the pieces that are essential to the belonging and that you can't skip are building trust, establishing that psychological safety that, if I am going to be vulnerable with you, that it will never be used against me. And then empathy on both the mentee and the mentor. And so, all of those pieces are just super complex, and we probably would need to spend an entire session unpacking that. But I would say that those are some of the pieces that stand out for me. And when I've skipped over them just to feel that sense of belonging and make a connection, I haven't brought my authentic self to work. And not only is it exhausting, it's just not productive for myself or for the other individual.
Wow, that's phenomenal. Anyone else? That's great. That's really, you talk about exhaustion. I think we all feel a little bit tired. We're getting bombarded. And then you have this extra responsibility that you take on. Who else would like to answer? Gabriella, Jennifer, you have responses to
Yeah,
that question?
yes.
You go.
Again, from my point of view, I I think what's important, or one of the things that surprised me probably more than anything, is when I'm actually in a mentoring relationship without really knowing it, because it's organic and it sort of happens naturally. I met a young woman when she was a freshman in college, and without really intentionally knowing it, she had been following my career. She joined me at Xerox when I used to work at Xerox as an intern. And then when I moved to Intel, she moved to Intel. So she jokingly says that she was my stalker. But again, we developed this mentoring relationship without formally calling it a mentoring relationship. So I think one of the important lessons for me, and again, that kind of surprising, is to always remain available and accessible to young people who may be looking for that mentor. But again, they may not come through a formal mentoring program or through a formal mentoring ask. It's just, again, make yourself available and care enough about that young person looking to learn something and also to give something back as well. So again, that was one of the surprises for me. Sometimes these mentoring relationships will happen organically, whether you're aware of them or not.
Excellent. Excellent. Now, Jennifer, I'm sure you want to weigh in on that. What has surprised you about this mentoring a relationship, those conduits that you form?
Yeah, I love the comments that have been made, especially building trust and building psychological safety. I think that when you're vulnerable and you open yourself up, to your mentee, especially if you're willing to share kind of your failures along the way. Some of the times things didn't work out the way that they were planned. Some of the trips that we make for lots of different reasons, and we're open to sharing that. Sometimes those can be the most, powerful learnings, to share that perspective and how you kind of got back up again, or just being vulnerable to open that you might learn something different, a different perspective or view by being open with your mentee as well. I think those are when the moments that I will remember the most over my years, and I hope that's the moments that they remember the most. But it does take time. It does take trust. That you're creating a bit of a sacred space and a trusted space, because at the end of the day, you really do want the best, for each other. And I think that's where I found meaning. A lot of times the superficial questions are what comes first. How do you get this role? How could I think about this opportunity? But it's the learning that we've done along the way, and often the failures that really can be helpful and make a difference.
Yeah, I love that comment too. I'm really having fun with this. Part of what is involved in mentoring, either formal or informal, is that sense of vulnerability, but also letting people know, especially if it's somebody who may be younger or let's say less experienced, that you've had scrapes and bruises. I've had a mentoring relationship with a young man for about a dozen years now. And what's been fascinating is he looks at my life and says, wow, I can't believe that you feel that there's things that you haven't done yet. And, when I look at you, it looks like you have it all. He told me once, I think you hit Powerball. And I'm like, no, you just don't understand that there's been a lot that doesn't look obvious, but a lot of times there have been hills and valleys. So I think it's important to convey to individuals, not that there's not a sense of perfection here, but we're growing together. And what I'm trying to do is make sure you don't hit your head when you don't need to. Want to ask one other question, and it is around resources. We've got a question from the audience. Are there resources that you would recommend as an organization, a company starts to improve or to launch their mentoring efforts? Because each of you have expressed a lot about the design of the mentoring program inside. But if you were talking to someone who doesn't have that yet, what would you recommend as a way for them to get started and to make sure that it sustains itself? Who wants to take that response first? Patricia, I'll come to you.
I was like writing stuff down feverishly. I would say listen to your employees. We do an annual engagement survey, and really, your employees are going to be the ones that will inform your decisions best. And so, I think also don't try to do a one size fits all. There is no magic cure for anything or pill or program that you can do. And so know that what might work for a year might not work the next year. What might work in one location might not work in another. And so I think that that's oftentimes the easy way to just say, here's what we're going to do, and then hope everyone likes it. If you build it, it will come type of mentality. And so I would say be agile and nimble enough that you continue to innovate and continuously improve the work.
I love that. That's phenomenal. Jennifer, how about you? Then we'll go to Gabriella.
Sometimes it's the simple things that can lead to big things. I've been really excited about things that I've learned today. So you can bet after our panel today, I'll be reaching out to the panelists to see how I can connect and hopefully continue a conversation where this panel has ended. And there's been so many great speakers today with Million Women's Mentors that maybe you heard something that resonated. Maybe that there's something that you want to learn a little bit more, or someone that you think that you can have a connection with. And I do think when you're open and honest with the the why and what you're trying to achieve, people are typically responsive to that. Yes, there's lots of great third-party partners. There's great books. There's great podcasts and journals to follow for sure. But sometimes it's just those little steps of making a connection and seeing how you might continue to foster a relationship or make a new relationship that can then help you grow too.
Tremendous. My friend, what would you say to that? How would you advise somebody as they were about to start a mentoring program?
Yes, I echo what the rest of the panelists said. I think it's the simple things, and definitely listen to your customers, for this mentoring program. Again, there's many resources on the what's, the tools, the guides, the how to. But I think the magic comes in the approach that you take, and that you try to customize. Like Patricia said, if you take an approach that is general, sometimes you're going to miss a lot of marks there, because people are individual and they're unique, and relationships are unique. um, what I would advise is try different approaches. Don't stick to the traditional one-on-one. There may be group settings, or one-on-two, or triads. You may also try different ways of connecting people prior to matching them, like having some type of social networking event, or opportunity where people get to know each other, so they can find someone that's a little bit has a shared affinity with that individual, so that again those relationships happen more naturally, versus trying to force in a mentor-mentee relationship that in some cases may not be a good fit. So really stretch your imagination, I would say, and try different things. Don't always rely on the old methods, and look for, like Patricia said, look to listen to your employees for ideas.
I must say that we're at the end of our moment here, but Gabriela Gonzalez, the Deputy Director for the Intel Corporation Foundation, Patricia Contreras, the Vice President of Public Affairs for Rockwell Automation, and Jennifer Walker, Vice President of Global Benefits and Global HR Operations for ADM. You all are absolutely phenomenal. I'm glad that we had a chance to collaborate. You have mentored me this afternoon, and I'm going to try to do my best to keep it going. God bless, and we'll turn it back over to our moderator. Thank you.
Now we invite you to join the workshops. You can access your workshop by clicking your schedule on Hay Summit in the upper right-hand corner. The workshops begin at 1:45 Eastern.